In the Tudor period, some people were given the power by God to heal just through the power of touch. Welcome back to Tudor Tales, and today we're thinking about magical healing via touching and stroking. Touching and stroking was very much part of the healing ritual when we think about late medieval and 16th century magic, and this typically went alongside prayers and charms. It was very much, as with a lot of magic, intertwined with religion. Now, it was often believed that the power to heal was given by God, or it may be given by God via some other means, such as via fairies. It could also come from social position. So if you were, say, the seventh son of the seventh son, that might give you some sort of magical abilities. And also if you were the monarch, which I'll come to in just a moment. Now, there may have been some sort of scientific, at the time anyway, basis for stroking and touching, because if you think about the theory of the humours, the Galen theory of the humours, that say the body has too much black bile, for example, the method of kind of stroking may then actually move that away from the afflicted part. What there isn't really that I can tell a scientific reason for is that you could be healed by being touched by a freshly hanged man. So I think I might avoid that one, but there was some folklore surrounding that. But the really big one that lots of people will have heard of was the royal touch, often associated with the king's evil or scrofula, though that wasn't all it was associated with. And this type of magic, although it might not have been referred to as magic, this kind of this sort of special healing survived the Reformation. So we see it very much in the 17th century, particularly with Charles, but we're not thinking about them today, we're thinking about the Tudors. So the first British monarch to ever to use the king's touch, so to touch somebody to make them well, was Edward the Confessor, and he talked about curing the king's evil, which was scrofula. And if you've never seen or heard of scrofula, don't go Google image searching it. If you're eating your breakfast, it's not the prettiest of things. It's like an infection of the lymph node, but it sort of brings up lots of kind of sores on the face and the neck. And this was, again, quite a common condition. Some particularly gruesome physicians' accounts talk about removing worms from the holes and things like that. Lovely. Anyway, so Edward the Confessor kind of had this idea that he could touch people and stop this. The idea was that then also you would be, while you're ill, looked after at the crown's expense. Now, by the 13th century, this stopped and you just got a coin instead. So you weren't sort of really looked after the initial touching. You were just given this coin, but this coin kind of in itself had a bit of a magical value. Now, Henry VII really revived this process and kind of really laid down the structure for exactly what happened. And there's still a book that you can read that was published later on, but it was based on his method of exactly what the chaplain says, exactly what the king says, exactly how the patients are brought back and forth and what they're given. And he made this part of like royal ceremony, and then all the Tudors continued this after him. They all took part in this. Now, there's some suggestion about who did it more. We've got more records, unsurprisingly, of Henry VII and Henry VIII's actual sort of standalone ceremonies that they did this for. And the records are quite sparse for his children. There's sort of not really any record at all for Edward, although there does seem to be pretty convinced that he was doing it. But the actual logistics of the ceremonies we don't have. But it does seem that in the actual ceremonies themselves, Mary and Elizabeth were performing more touchings, so that maybe theirs were a bit more streamlined or they went for longer. Now, while this seems like a very sort of gracious and kind thing to be doing, to really think you are healing these people, there may have been a slightly different reason with Henry VII. At the start of his reign, it's all very insecure, unstable. He really needs to establish himself as the king. And if you've got this kind of magic touch from God, then that is really a sign that you are divinely chosen, that you are the rightful monarch and God wants you there. So this may have been an extra kind of step in his process to really cement the Tudor rule. We also see kind of out in parishes funds being raised to send the sick to London to have this done, which is a really lovely idea, I think, and tells you quite a lot about community at the time. Other conditions beyond scrofula were treated by some monarchs, not Elizabeth I, it would seem, but previously things like epilepsy, or they would have called the falling evil, and also kind of muscular spasms. For example, they had things called cramp rings, which were originally coins turned into rings. And there's quite a famous image of Mary I kind of on her knees at Easter blessing these rings so they could be passed on to people to cure them of these cramps. And she kind of elevated this by also adding like holy oil into the mix as well. Something else that the Tudors brought in was when they received the touch, when they received the blessing, they received a special coin called the Angel. This was a coin that was first minted in 1465. It featured Michael defeating the dragon, and it was quite a common coin, but it was pretty valuable. So they would be kind of blessed with this, and then it would be attached to a ribbon. There'd be a hole in it, and it'd be put around their neck for them to wear. So we're going back to that idea of kind of wearing a talisman or like an amulet to help you heal. So in this whole process, it was quite a long process. The king himself or queen would have to kneel and be blessed. They'd have to sort of receive confession and be pardoned. And then the sick would be brought in, they would kneel, they would be taken away again, they'd be brought back again, they'd be given this angel, and then finally taken away again by the physicians. And then the king and the chaplain, or the queen and the chaplain, would kind of have these secret prayers to pray for the sick person. So there you go, that's a quick overview of healing touch and sort of the king's evil, or the royal touch to remove the king's evil. While, as we will talk about in later videos, magic and the church didn't always go hand in hand. In some situations, it very much did. And it's like this idea that God is giving somebody this power to then touch and heal. And that's certainly still something we see today in certain places. Thank you very much for listening. The next video will be all about protection magic. So I will see you again soon.